Hey everybody, it's Dr. Meri Crouley here. I am at the Rev 17 event here in Yuba City at the Church of Glad Tidings. I'm here with Leigh Dundas, attorney, human rights activist, one who's been on the anti-trafficking front for a long time. And Leigh spoke last night, and it was amazing because, it almost makes you want to, in fact, I'm going to cry right now because hearing all these different people speaking and just the atrocity of what's going on. And I'm telling you, it's like people are in la la land where it's almost like, I don't want to know, la la la, it's too hard to think about. But Leigh, what would you say to that? You spoke last night. I just heard Dr. Frank speak, and Louis Herms is on right now.
Yeah. I think that it's easy to be in La La Land in America. We have it pretty darn good. And we are many, many generations removed from the people who broke from England and birthed this great country under impossible odds, really. I mean, crossing icy Delaware rivers the night before Christmas, 3.5% of the population fighting, the rest of the people even then being in La La Land, and us giving a giant bird to England and saying we're not doing it your way anymore. We're going to go make our own country over here. But that was like in a year it'll be like 250 years ago. That's a long darn time. And your generation, my generation, we have not seen sustained conflict. We've seen little hot spots in the Mideast, Afghanistan, Iraq, post 9/11, but we haven't seen Vietnam War, Korean War, World War II. And I think the lack of that makes it pretty darn easy to get complacent. There's an interesting statistic about mental illness, which is it almost goes non-existent during war when everybody, homeless people, poor people, bored housewives, busy businessmen, everybody in between has to go shoulder to shoulder and fight for their lives, fight for their freedom, fight for their country. It gives people a higher calling, a higher purpose than just working for money or working for whatever reason people work for. And we haven't had that for a long time. I think COVID allowed a lot of us who saw the writing on the wall early days, like you did, like I did, like our followers did, to really step out and for the very first time become the heroes that we've always just sort of been able to read about in history books. But what I said last night is, vis-a-vis the sex trafficking fight and the establishment of the Peace of Heaven Rescue Facility that Pastor Dave Bryan and Church of Glad Tidings is spearheading, I'm like, look, maybe, just maybe, God didn't put you here to be like a Medal of Honor winner congressionally or a George Washington. Maybe God wanted you to be the hero you were meant to be. Maybe, just maybe, God wanted you to be a soccer mom or soccer dad, just like you were to your 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 kids, but times many. And this is how you do it. You give of your time, of your talents, of your resources to Peace of Heaven. This allows you to be like the leader and the hero in your community. And we need that. We need the people to step out of the darkness, step out of the wallflower phase of their life and go, you know what? Not on my watch. We are not allowing pedophiles to rape 7-year-olds anymore. We're going to rescue them. And then we need somewhere to put them where they can actually grow and become productive human beings. And like I said last night, and I'll say it again, you don't fix what these children lack by giving them more of the same. They lack family, they lack stability, they lack love, they lack Jesus. That's how they got, in many cases, trafficked in the first place. Not always, but by and large. So you cannot just throw them into an institution where you've got some bored 20-year-old girl thumbing through her Instagram reel every day, and then the next one comes in and the next one, and you're drugging them and, you're letting them sleep in tin beds, and that doesn't work. You need to shower them and embrace them and sort of cocoon them in love and light and hope and health and real education. And that is the real thing of difference that Pastor Dave and this vision is bringing to bear. And I can't wait to see it through to fruition.
Well, in this church, it started out from what I've heard is this used to be, the guy who actually, it used to be, I think, what was it?
A nudist colony.
A nudist colony.
A hippie commune. Yeah.
A hippie nudist commune. And then the guy ended up getting saved. He told, he became a Christian, found Jesus, and he told all of his people, listen, you have to put clothes on.
Get married if you want to keep
married.
Out drugs.
Yeah.
Throw your joints and your other drugs down the toilet.
Yeah, and then he asked Pastor Dave, can you be the pastor? And Pastor Dave said, well, I guess,
Right.
So what was that, like 25 years ago?
40 almost years ago. And the guy who was the ex-hippie commune is still a very active part of the church. He was a brilliant businessman. Pastor Dave actually got brought in to debug the church because a couple million had gone missing. And it was the original church founder, Lou Benninger's money. And he'd given it to the church and he didn't think they were using it right. So he took it back. And Dave came in and sat Lou down and said, well, that's considered theft in California and you can do hard time for it. And Lou looked at Dave, Pastor Dave, and said, yeah, well, you know something, Sonny? There's some things that are worth going to jail for.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. They need to do God's work with this money. I didn't work hard to make all this money and have it go down the toilet for stupid stuff. So Pastor Dave, being Pastor Dave, if you know anything about Pastor Dave, was like, yeah, I kind of agree with this guy, this ex-hippie. And they agreed to sort of co-pastor the church. And Lou was like, well, what would you do if you were pastoring it? And Pastor Dave's like, I don't know. I think I'd try to live like Jesus did and teach other people to do the same. And their motto is, find a need and fill it, and find a hurt and heal it. And they've been doing that for almost 4 straight decades ever since.
Well, and the thing is, the real problem is, I think, Leigh, it's the hearts of the country, because when you've got, 80% of people, I don't know the stats, watching pornography, even in the church, and the porn is what fuels the trafficking. And, I heard a podcast several years ago, and I thought, the guy who was on SG2 Report or something, and he said, when they want to take over a country, they flood it with porn. And so right now it's the heart of the country. If men, it's mostly men that purchase the children or women, whatever, but the women are also traffickers. So, we're getting down to the heart of this.
Yeah. Well, and we just heard Dr. Doug Frank talking this morning, who's the election integrity guru, was nominated for a Nobel Prize for his physics work. He's a hardcore scientist filled with Holy Spirit. And he was talking about the incredible overlap, because I started doing the election integrity political work last 4 years. Everywhere I turn around, I keep hearing child trafficking. Like, what is this Venn diagram overlap of these two worlds? And he said it, and I've said it before, but people elect these seemingly great leaders, and then they get seated in the legislature, or they become a judge or whatever, and then they're neutered. They're sitting there on their hands doing nothing. And all of us are going, they're not a radical communist. We thought they were good people. They were a member of whatever political party. And now they're just sitting there doing nothing, or even worse, they seem to be doing the devil's work. Like, what is going on? And in the 50s, it was really easy to blackmail people. You would take a picture of them cheating on their wife. You would figure out from their account they cheated on their taxes. You'd go to the guy and be like, hey, I have the goods on you. You cheated on your spouse. You cheated on your whatever. You cooked your books. And, in the 50s, if you threatened to out the guy, he was like, oh, because everybody, Brady Bunch era would have been like, oh, he did what? Now I come to you and I say, oh, Gavin Newsom cheated on, one of his spouses or one of his girlfriends. People are like, oh, yeah, that's old news. Like, nobody gives a rat's behind if you cheat on your spouse or your taxes. They should, but they don't. So the only kernel in my way of thinking, and I could be wrong, but I've seen nothing that would evince that my deduction is incorrect at this point. The only way you can truly control an up-and-coming politician or an existing politician is by having a Hunter Biden laptop. The only crime that still makes the average soccer mom or dad that's busy with their own life go, whoa, stop the presses. They did what? Is if you show up with a Hunter Biden laptop and you've got 7-year-olds and sex and the guy all involved in the same thing. And so that is why child trafficking, child pornography is the gold ticket way to control our politicians. You want to fix our political process? You can't not fix pornography and trafficking, because they are inextricably intertwined at this point in our country and around the world.
Well, Leigh, I interviewed a guy named Detective James Rothstein. He was a detective in the mid-'60s until the 80s in New York. He covered, basically was the detective for pedophile rings, trafficking rings. And he said he'd get to the highest levels to bust the high levels. And then the feds would step in and say, national security, we have to shut it down. And so I remember watching a podcast, Dave Janda, and he said in the 80s, he was under the Reagan administration. I forget what position he was appointed to. And he said a well-known politician, he said, everyone would know, came to him, he said, Dave, you can go to a baseball game, you can go to a restaurant, but do not go to the home of some of these politicians, in particular, George H.W. Bush. Because if you do, you're going to see some little kids running around. And I think this is kind of interesting. And the next thing you know, you're going to wake up with the Polaroid on your chest with you showing you did something to one of these kids and they've got you.
Yeah.
James Rothstein said probably 90% of Congress, the Senate, is blackmailed.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was talking to a pastor recently, I would say 3 months ago, and she was talking to a veteran, really old legislator, probably mid 70s to mid 80s. I not really old. That's not really old when I'm only 20 years away from that myself, but been in the game for half a century at a state level in a state up by the Great Lakes. And the woman was telling this pastor, she goes, 4 months. Our incoming state legislators are either controlled by way of the Polaroid trick you just discussed at the time they arrive, or they're given 4 months and the dark side is trying to convert them, trying to get them drunk, trying to slip them a Mickey, trying to pose them with a kid, trying to get that Polaroid, that blackmail evidence. And if they don't have the guy by the short and curly at the end of 4 months of his first term, he doesn't come in for a second term. They want to be able to control you. They want to be able to push through their communist agenda. And the way they do that is by having a Hunter Biden laptop or a thumb drive on you in these days. Polaroid would work too, but it's a lot more high-techy now. And that is just the way it's done. I mean, I had a case in the 90s at the law firm, early days of my career. I've been practicing almost 32 years, I think now. And it was a civil lawsuit, defamation between companies, trade secret ripoffs. Our client was they used to sell lists of names for magazines because this was pre-internet, right? And you would have people who bought Victoria's Secret lingerie and they would cross-sell that list of names to Fredericks of Hollywood, or you'd buy a Bass Pro Shop fishing rod and they would cross-sell that to REI. So you would have these lists of people who were interested in a hobby, and that list would be a hot ticket for a similarly situated competitor in the industry. And these mailing list houses would just deal in these names lists. So the competitor to our client had, done a whole bunch of gnarly stuff, but he was also just a generally bad guy. And none of his clientele would rat him out. And we were like, why are none of his clients? Because he would cannibalize the list. So he would take names that were androgynous, like mine, right? And I would be a male in real life, Bass Pro fisherman, but my name is Leigh, Leigh. It can go either way. And he'd throw that into a Fredericks of Hollywood list and then he'd sell it. And half the names on this list were dudes. Like, they're not interested. They're not 18-year-old girls buying lingerie. So the list would perform horribly for the person, the end user would buy it. And the guy would finally figure it out. And he'd go back to this bad dude and he'd be like, dude, you sold me a pile of bullpucky. Like, this list is performing horribly. I'm going to rat you out. And the bad guy, the one who'd sold the list, would be like, no, you ain't. The guy's like, yeah, I'm going to go to the cops. Either give me my money back or I'm going to go to the cops. This is theft. This is, all sorts of stuff. And the guy's like, no, you aren't. Because the very first thing this bad guy would do is have a big old party at his house in the Hollywood Hills. Mm-hmm. And he would provide them anything they wanted. And when I asked one of the industry know-it-alls in deposition, I go, what do you mean when you say the bad guy would provide the party goers anything they wanted? And she's like, well, food, drink. I'm like, yeah, what else? Oh, escorts. I'm like, are we talking like chauffeured limo services or like people for sex? And she's like, yeah, both. And I'm like, define this for me. And she's like, children, animals, whatever they're into. I was like, and it all ended up, Meri, on the same depot page transcript. We get booklets. And I took that page of this scintillating, fiery admission from this woman and I framed it and put it on my wall. But anyway, to bring this story to a close, the ripped off clients would go back to this guy and be like, I'm going to rat you out, dude. I'm going to turn you over to the cops. They'd be like, no, you aren't, because here's a picture of you doing X, Y, or Z with kids. And here you are snorting coke and everything else. And he would control them. It was just a blackmail operation. And so he had the goods on everybody in Hollywood, all of his own clients that he was ripping off. Finally, our case went away. 10 years goes by. My old CFO emails me one day. He goes, hey, that bad guy that was our opposing party in that case from, the 90s. I'm like, yeah. He goes, he was just picked up for murder. These dudes are bad dudes. If they're blackmailing, mark my words, they're not just blackmailing, they're dealing in all the dark crimes.
Well, and then you look at Hollywood, as you were just talking about, you look at the Diddy. Yeah. Most of these people do not get to these highest levels of fame or in the music industry or the Hollywood industry unless they do the deal.
Yeah.
any major celebrity that you see in this day and age, basically somehow
They sign
has
their
been
soul.
controlled.
Yeah.
And so this is why, years ago, probably 20 years ago, Leigh, I woke up one day and the voice of God spoke to me. I don't always hear him this clear, but I heard this voice say, I want you to build a studio to rival Disney and call it Destiny. And I'm like going, I don't really know how to do that, or do I really want to do that? But ultimately, we just trademarked Destiny Film Studios last year. The Lonnie Frisbee movie, The Prodigal. You know what I mean? There's a time for
Things
everything.
happen in their own
And when you
time.
don't quit, we're too legit to quit. We stay the course, but I'm telling you, God told me the greatest movies have yet to be released, the greatest music, because we're going to flip it.
Yeah.
But first it has to be exposed. And we're in the exposure.
We are so in the exposure, and people are ready for it. When I first started doing this work in 2013, fighting sex slavery, particularly in other countries, the only people who knew the words sex slave or satanic ritual abuse were really pastors who were doing the work overseas, ex-Navy SEALs that we were sending in to pose as buyers, to get the intel so we could bring the brothels down. And, it was the church. And that was it. Government leaders who were actually trying to prosecute the good ones. But I mean, the average soccer mom and dad, clueless. We came back, true story. We're standing in front of a Ruby's Diner, which if you're not from California, it's an old 50s, like Fonzie sort of style red, leather couches diner. And it caters to soccer moms with, age 0 to 10-year-olds. And my daughter and I and my husband had just been traveling Southeast Asia and Australia for almost 6 months. And we picked up our little girlfriend. I was taking them to the Ruby's Diner. I didn't know it was Ruby's birthday. So normally there's no wait. This time there's like a line out the door. We're standing in line to go get our burger and our, root beer float. And my daughter's little friend, who was also 8 at the time, looks at my daughter and goes, "Oh, what were you guys doing overseas?" Or "How was your trip?" Or, something generic like that.
Yeah.
And my daughter goes, "My mommy got a job fighting child sex slavery." And she says it like children do, right? Like you could have heard this pronouncement throughout the parking lot. It got really quiet. There was no traffic going by. And all of the soccer moms in front of me in line with their infants and their diaper bags and their toddlers running around, like, stop the presses. All of them are like, and I moved to shush my daughter. I'm embarrassed to admit. I bent over and I'm like, and I looked at this row of eyes peering at me, all these soccer moms. And I'm like, you know what? To heck with it. I'm never going to shush my daughter. She's proud of me. I'm doing work to be proud of. And this is planting a seed. These little moms are going to go home, and when their kids are napping and they're bored silly, they're going to Google child sex slavery in Asia, and they're going to start getting an education. And so be it. But that is the level of societal awareness we were at 12 years ago when I started doing this. Now, I think everybody in the world has been, talking about the jabberdoos and the arms, mandates, and child sex trafficking over the last 5 years. We are really pulling back the curtain on this. And that is the silver lining of the hell that has been the COVID tyranny.
Well, just to finish up, I remember I was doing an interview with Noreen Gosh, who's her son in Des Moines, Iowa. That's like, you think of Field of Dreams, corn and, baseball. And basically her son got abducted as he was 12-year-old paperboy on his route.
Ooh.
Basically, long story, finally on the Lisa Gibbons show, she shared her story. She said, "Johnny, your father and I are no longer married. We're no longer living in the home that you're abducted in from." She said, "Please come home." She told me this, Leigh. 3 months later, middle of the night, knock on the door. She goes to the door and looks out the peephole, and she hears the voice of her son, who's now in his 20s, saying, "Mom, it's me, Johnny."
Oh.
And she opens the door. He's with another gentleman, boy his age, in his 20s. She hasn't seen him in over 12 years. And he sits on the couch. He said, "I've got abducted by an elite pedophile ring that goes up to the highest levels of government, entertainment, and business." And he said, "I eventually escaped, but I have to stay hidden. They'll kill me. They'll kill you." And the police department was involved. The husband was involved. I'm telling you, it goes down this rabbit hole that people
Very
don't
dark.
believe that people can do this. So, Leigh, as we close out here today, I have, my daughter, I have a little grandson, and, she doesn't want to know. I understand, when
It's
I look
hard.
at Landon, I think, wow, this would be somebody's little treat. As hard as that is to say, everybody, the perversion of the pedophile, it's a sickness. It's like cancer. It keeps on spreading.
Oh, it's an addiction. Just
What
like
would
meth.
you say? I mean, how can this piece of heaven here is a prototype of what, we need to raise $2 million in just another 10 days. And so, and then from there on out, it's like, it's got to be facilitated. It's got to be.
Yeah, I would say you were put here for such a time as this. You and I are never going to get to be George Washington. We're not going to be some war hero in all likelihood if you're a slightly plump soccer mom in your 50s like I am, or even older. This is your one chance to make a difference. I think God put you here for this purpose. If you are listening to Meri's podcast right now, and it's so easy when we're in the car, we're doing dishes, we're doing yard work, we're in the garden, and we're just listening to these podcasts to like, oh, that was nice, swipe to the next one. Stop what you're doing. Go to peaceofheaven.life, P-E-A-C-E, peace, like harmony and peace, like peace, peaceofheaven.life, and get involved, because you're not here to be a potted plant. You're not here to sit on the sidelines. You are spoiling your worth. You are squandering your riches. What I said on the stage last night is absolutely true. All of the stuff that you see right now is absolutely the true meaning of the word non-essential. Your clothing, if you're living in Sacramento in the summertime, don't need it. We wear it so we don't scare each other, but it's actually not a necessity. Your microphone, your computer, your couch in your living room, your dog sweaters, your car, your everything. You don't get to go home with that to God. God doesn't care how much money you make. Money is paper. It is green paper. It has no independent value. The highest value of that money is not how many of them you hold, how many dollars are in your bank account. It is what you choose to do with them. There are children dying right now for lack of being rescued, and we can change their lives. All we need are the resources to do it. Highest and best use of your money, the way you can actually join this fight and be a hero, is figuring out what your talents are, figuring out how much discretionary and even non-discretionary income you have in your checkbook, and doing something good with it. And if it's not this, fine. Go find some other good cause. But for heaven's sakes, get off the sideline and into the game. Life is short, and we're not just put here to exchange O2 for CO2. You were put here for a higher purpose. And in my humble opinion, this is it, and it gets no better than this. So I encourage you guys to get involved in any way that you see fit. And
and even Leigh, I know on Pastor Dave, peaceofheaven.life website, they have it where you can give $1 a day, $30 a month, which everyone can do. I mean, you go to Starbucks, which
homeless people can do.
You can go to a coffee shop, you spend $5 a day.
People spend 10 now. That was 5 years ago. But after Biden inflation, they're spending like $9.99 on. I don't drink coffee, so I don't even know what the prices are. But it's a lot of money. You can do without a lot of the stuff we have in our life. All of this stuff, the shoes you buy, the extra pairs of shoes, your extra car sitting in the driveway, your extra vacation home. I am asking you to go big or go home. These children need you. This is a good cause. This is a great cause, but it doesn't happen without resources. And this country was not built like with people going, oh, I'm going to comfortably give what I can comfortably do. George Washington was not comfortable when he stepped out into an icy Delaware River on December 24th. Okay. The people sitting in foxholes, jumping onto the beaches of Normandy so that you and I can go sleep on a feather pillow tonight. That wasn't comfortable. Compared to them, this is a relatively easy lift. I'm asking you to go, if you can give 20, give 200. Go do it sacrificially. Stretch. If you can easily give 200, do 2,000. You can do 2,000. Yeah, I'm asking you to do 20. I'm asking you to hit your credit cards. I'm asking you to hit your HELOC. I'm actually asking you to do that. Nothing great was ever built by people punching a clock from 9 to 5 and doing it the easy way. This is hard work, but it is God's work. And let me tell you something. This was not Pastor Dave's vision. It wasn't Meri Crouley's vision. It wasn't Leigh Dundas' vision. This is God's vision. God right now is asking you to get involved. We're simply the hands and the feet and the mouthpieces for him. So be there, be square, show up for Peace of Heaven. Go to peace, spelled peace, P-E-A-C-E, peaceofheaven.life, and do your part, and we'll see you on the other side.
Yeah, Leigh, thank you so much for coming on, and thanks for watching. We are here. We're not getting paid to be here. We're volunteering our time because, to me, this is an epidemic. This is something that, unless God touches this nation what he said, what we do to the least of these, the children, we do unto him. And if we're going to put our head in the sand and say, oh, we don't want to know because, you know, when I came back from Thailand, as I closed, I went to Thailand in 2017, Leigh. I got some great footage and I came home and the Lord said, I don't want you to do this about Thailand. I want you to show what's happening in America. And so my film Freedom Cry came out. I've been showing it around the country. We're going to launch it on a network soon. But let me tell you this, each one, reach one, teach one. We all have to get in the game. Everyone.
100%.
It's all hands on deck. We all have
Yep.
children, or if you don't, you know somebody who has children or grandchildren. They're after your kids.
They are.
And it's become everyone has a cell phone. They're trying to get kids addicted at 8 years old to porn, even younger. Because if they get addicted at 8, by the time they're 18, they're not even going to be able to have normal sex unless they watch porn. So it's become an epidemic. Nobody wants to talk about this, but it's real. And so let me tell you, go to peaceofheaven.life, give. Whatever you give, you know what I mean? It's going to make a difference. Thank you, Leigh, for coming on. Thank you for watching. Now is the time. Let's make a difference. The best is yet to come. Coming to you live from Yuba City at the Church of Glad Tidings, Dr. Meri Crouley with Leigh Dundas. God bless you.